It's the Happy Families podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
Hello and welcome to the Happy Families podcast. My name is Dr. Justin Coulson. It's great to have you listening. I'm really excited for today's conversation because it's about a brand new TV show starting tonight on SBS. It's called The Swap. And my guest today is Ali Kadri. Let me tell you a bit about Ali. He's been the CEO of the Islamic College of Brisbane for the last 3 years, and he's also the architect behind the TV show The Swap, which is an Australian-first social experiment exploring what happens when you take 12 students and families from very different cultures, religions and backgrounds and you bring their worlds together.
There's only one station that brings you everything happening in Brisbane.
Today, in Australia, a unique experiment is about to unfold.
There you go. Have a great day.
A school swap that brings together 12 students and families from very different cultures and religions.
So over this program, and I've seen the first of 3 episodes, it basically covers one school term, and Ali accompanies these students on an eye-opening, provocative, emotional roller coaster of a journey as they experience anxiety and excitement and I think wonder as they engage with one another's schools and families and communities. For everybody who's involved, the swap is literally the first time that they've experienced being close to someone who sees the world in a completely different way. We're talking about a bunch of kids at an Islamic college who, in many cases, have not actually got any friends who are not Islamic. And we've got kids who have no religious affiliation whatsoever and kids who have strong Christian ideas, and they're bringing it all together in this TV show. It's a fascinating show. We're going to talk about it in a sec. Let me tell you about Ali. He was born and raised in India following the death of his brother during a period of sectarian violence and anti-Muslim riots. Ali's father encouraged him to move from India to Australia so that he could study. He arrived in Brisbane in 2003, completed a Master of Business Administration, an MBA at Charles Sturt University, and a Master of Professional Accounting at JCU, and a graduate certificate in International Relations at Griffith. My goodness, Ali has some qualifications coming out of his ears. He lives in Brisbane, and the first episode of The Swap premieres this evening on SBS. Ali, welcome to the Happy Families podcast. Long intro, but I think that everything we're talking about today, we want to make sure that everyone knows who you are and what you've done.
No, thank you. That was a fantastic intro, Dr. Justin. I'm really humbled to be here today.
Can you, I've kind of given a bit of a description of the show, but I want to put myself in your shoes for a sec. And in episode 1, we kind of get this opportunity. You're the CEO of an Islamic college, which is really conservative and obviously strongly religiously oriented. And you bring 6 kids who either have no faith whatsoever or a Christian faith into the school environment, and they get introduced to everything that you guys do. But then you send 6 of your kids into a state school or a Catholic school, into these completely different environments as well. Can you describe the pressure that you felt as you came up with this idea and tried to convince families that this would be a great idea?
I'm still a little bit anxious before it goes on air on how people are going to receive and feel about all this. But to be honest, nothing worth doing it is easy. And I always believe that right things are always difficult at the start. But if you do it with sincerity and good intentions, then the result is always positive. So there was a lot of stress and anxiety when I kind of came up with the idea and when we are actually filming. But I do know that this is the right thing to do, not just for our community here in the Islamic College of Brisbane, but I think for a wider community and for the Australians moving forward.
Let me ask you why it's the right thing to do. Why is this, I guess you'd call it integration or familiarization? Why do you see it as so important?
So it partly is because of my experiences growing up in India. People know India is quite a diverse nation. I am from a minority community in India, which is Muslim community. And growing up, I kind of had a lot of friends who were of different faiths. But then, over the last few decades, I guess, people in India have been separating from each other. They've been developing in silos. So there were many sort of Indias within India, if you like. And what that did was that created so much mistrust that the politics and geopolitics and ill-intentioned people utilize that to cause further divisions, which led into violence, right? I come to Australia, and for the first time in my life, as a minority, I'm still a minority in Australia, but I felt more accepted than I felt growing up in India. And kind of, I always say this, that I embraced Australia as my country because of how people made me feel here, which was much better than how I felt in India. Now, when I meet Australian Muslims who are born and brought up here, especially post September 11, there is a bit of alienation going on, because they feel like the wider community kind of looks at them with mistrust. There is Islamophobia, so they kind of bunker down into their silo. And the parents want to make sure that they shield their young children from Islamophobia, so they send them to Islamic school, and then Islamic school is very bunkered down as well. We don't have many non-Muslim kids, like one or two, and out of 1,600 students, we only have one or two. So I was quite shocked that you have students who are born and brought up in Australia and don't have non-Muslim friends, which is not a good thing for them, because when they go out in the wider world, let's face it, majority of the people are not Muslims, not just in Australia, but across the world. And majority of the people don't think like Muslims. They're different. So I think the most important skill you got to learn is, how do you interact with them and feel confident in your identity as Australian and as Muslim? And I think the best way to do that was to do it in a controlled educational setting, where we expose them to different ideas and see how they interact with different ideas, sometimes polar opposite ideas. And to my pleasant surprise, the kids handle it very well. And I think it's good for our country to get to know each other. I mean, at the end of the day, no matter when we came from or where we came from, we are all Australians. And the efforts we are going to make are going to add to the success or the progress of our country collectively. So why not get to know each other? And that was the main reason behind it.
50% of the kids are not gay, but they have different what do you call that? Sexualities.
Ali, there are some really challenging moments in this. It's provocative. There's no other way to say it. How badly could this have gone for you?
Oh, look, I mean, ultimately I could have lost my job very earlier on. I only started 3 years ago. But luckily, I have the support of the board of the school. The community overall is quite supportive. But, when things go wrong, when you do something different and things go wrong, usually an individual is blamed for, no matter how good your intentions are. And, you have to be able to take those risks sometime to sort of do the right thing. And it could have cost me my job, effectively.
As I was watching episode 1, which, as I mentioned, is airing on SBS this evening, I was thinking very much. So Kylie and I have a religious faith, and we're open about expressing that. But we also often feel like we want to not make any noise about that and just let everybody live their lives the way that they want to live their lives, and we'll live our way as well. I've always felt, though, as a religious parent, that there is pressure for me that people who do not have a religious orientation don't experience. What was really fascinating was watching parents with no religious affiliation at all, people who quite happily say, oh, I'm an atheist, I'm agnostic, I don't know where I am, people who have extremely liberal views. As they start to interact with people whose views are different, their values are, I guess, under pressure, regardless of where you fit on that political spectrum or the faith spectrum or whatever values spectrum you want to choose. And I thought, I saw things really differently watching it. It really was eye-opening to me. People who have a strong Christian faith, as they have a child who identifies and says, I really like it a lot. I'm feeling a little bit of envy around what they do in an Islamic school. There are some good things there. And the parents are kind of going, oh, I don't know if I like this, because we want our child to respond to our values. Parents who are atheistic, parents who are far left, liberal leaning, parents having values challenged by kids who are saying, you know what, I'm wearing the Muslim clothing. I'm following a modest path as I'm having this experience, and it actually feels good, and I quite like how I look. Everybody was confronted. Everybody was challenged. What was the most eye-opening thing for you as you walked through this 12-week, one-term experience with these 12 kids?
you rightly pointed out, I mean, the participants had quite a different value system, and they wanted to bring up their kids in the values they sort of hold so dear. But they all had anxieties. I mean, Muslim parents thought that, their kids or themselves will be judged or be looked at in a different way for being Muslims. There were atheist parents who thought that their values will be undermined or disrespected, or they will not be accepted because of their values. So it just shows that all of us kind of, while wanting to protect our values, always worry that other people may think bad of us or wrong of our values. And I think that's not always the case. I think, a lot of times we respect each other or at least understand each other's values. But the person who is on the receiving end or who's believing in that stuff generally feels that their values are going to be undermined. So to give you a classical example, I look different. Of course, I'm of Indian origin. I go out with my wife, who is from Morocco, and she wears a hijab. And when we go out, a lot of times, people, especially in country town, North Queensland, people would look at us and look at her in a way where she felt a little uncomfortable. And she's recently arrived into Australia from Morocco, which is a majority Muslim country. So she kind of felt like, why are they looking at me? Is it because they're judging me? Am I in danger? But most of the times it's just out of curiosity. And it was a beautiful incident where once one person went up to her and she's like, I love your scarf. It's beautiful. And that's when she realized that, wow, people are looking at me because I look different, and perhaps they were admiring my scarf rather than thinking, negative or bad of me. And it wouldn't have occurred to her on her own unless that lady came and spoke to her, which needs guts as well. Because, to go up to a stranger and talk to them, not knowing whether they're going to speak English or not, is a difficult thing to do. But that little communication changed her whole experience or perception of living in Australia, for example, or people of Australian background. And she was kind of very, very fondly, she kind of says that, oh, look, people say Australia is a racist country, but they're not. Australians are beautiful, like they're good people, because of her experience. Now, that takes courage, that takes effort on both ends. And that is necessary. It's important for us to do so, because people, unfortunately, the people who have negative ways of dealing with differences are much more louder than most of us who have positive ways of dealing with differences. I mean, I personally, went to the mass in one of the schools. It was my first time going to a Catholic mass. And, there's some things I admired, some things I didn't understand, some things I found quite awkward and different. But, the overall experience was amazing. It was great to be there, in that church, in the mass, and participating in it. It didn't make me any less of a Muslim, but it most certainly gave me a whole new level of understanding and respect for Australians who are Catholics. And I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have gotten that respect unless I got out of my comfort zone, went into that church, and I was strong enough in my identity that this does not compromise me.
People think they're very rude and just a bit scary.
I want to be seen as me and not my hijab, not scary terrorist or something like that.
I love the stories that you've shared there, and it reminds me of, I don't remember the name of the scholar who came up with this phrase, but there's a religious scholar who talks about this thing called holy envy. The idea of holy envy, and you don't even have to be religious to have it. It's literally looking for the good in what others do. So if you have a religious practice that's different to somebody else's, you might say, well, I don't believe what they believe, but I love the way they do this, or I really appreciate their reverence for such and such. Like, we can have this appreciation even if we don't necessarily buy what they're believing or selling or whatever it is.
And Dr. Justin, that does not undermine who we are. I mean,
yes.
Look, at the end of the day, if you have a belief system, then fundamentally that there is a creator who's created us all. So, whatever faith you follow, you are children of the same father. If that's sort of, if I was to use a very Christian terminology to explain this, you're children of the same God. So, I think that understanding is fundamentally important, that all creation, all human beings are created by the same creator. We practice in a different way. And I think that's where we need to start with our differences, rather than starting by, okay, this is different and I don't like what you do, and I'm going to do everything in my power to criticize or change you. And that is, I think, what the problem or misunderstanding some people have.
While the religious differences are front and centre in the TV show The Swap, this is really a series about understanding other people, about changing mindsets, about becoming familiar with the unfamiliar, and about stretching our boundaries. The show is on this evening on SBS. Great show. I can't wait to watch the next 2 episodes. Ali Kadri, the CEO at ICB, the Islamic College of Brisbane, congratulations on the show. I can't wait to see how all of these episodes play out. And thanks for joining me to chat about the show today on the podcast.
Look, thank you very much for having me today. It was an honor, and I hope all the viewers are going to enjoy the show. And love to hear more and continue this experiment as we move forward in our futures.
Yeah, absolutely great stuff. I know that they'll enjoy it. In fact, I really recommend it. I'm looking forward to, like I said, watching the next couple of episodes as well. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. Craig Bruce is our executive producer. For more information about The Swap, check our show notes or just Google The Swap SBS. You'll find everything you need so that you can watch the show this evening if you're listening to the podcast on Wednesday, the 8th of March, which is where this episode is dropping. And for more information about making your family happier, please visit us at happyfamilies.com.au.